Good morning. I'm so glad you're joining me today. I believe this is not an ordinary day. This is a day the Lord has made, and He has already lined up victories, breakthroughs, and divine appointments in your path. Today, we're talking about overcoming fear and choosing trust over worry. Fear will always try to whisper, "What if it doesn't work out? What if you fail? What if things get worse?" But faith says, what if it does work out? What if God turns it around? What if this is the very thing that leads me into my destiny? Worry drains your strength, fear steals your joy, but trust releases God's power. When you choose trust, you are saying, "God, I may not see the way, but I know you have a way. I may not understand it, but I know you are in control." Remember, fear is a feeling, but faith is a decision. And today, you're making a decision. You're not going to let anxiety run your life. You're not going to let negative thoughts dominate your mind. You're going to stand firm and declare, "I trust you, Lord." No matter what you're facing this morning, health challenges, financial pressure, family struggles, God is bigger than that fear. The same God who brought you through in the past will bring you through again. Get ready. As you release worry and step into trust, peace is coming, strength is coming, victory is coming. Let's pray. Fear has a way of feeling permanent. When it shows up, it tries to convince you that it's here to stay, that this situation will never change, that the pressure you feel today will follow you tomorrow. Fear speaks in absolutes. It tells you that the door is closed for good, that the mistake disqualified you, that the diagnosis defines you, that the economy controls you. It magnifies the problem and minimizes your potential. But just because fear feels real doesn't mean it has the final word. Fear is temporary. Even when it feels overwhelming, it may be loud, but it is not lasting. God's promises, on the other hand, are permanent. They are not based on how you feel, what the news says, or how people respond to you. They are anchored in His unchanging character. Feelings shift, circumstances fluctuate, people come and go, markets rise and fall, but God does not change. What He has spoken over your life is not subject to the economy, not subject to your past, not subject to the opinions of others. His promises are steady when everything around you seems unstable. Fear often comes in seasons. There are moments when it feels stronger, when you step into something new, when you're waiting on an answer, when you're facing uncertainty. But seasons change. Just like winter gives way to spring, the season of fear will not last forever. You may be in a chapter right now where you don't see how things will work out. But chapters turn, pages flip. God is writing a bigger story than what you can currently see. What feels like a permanent setback is often a temporary setup for something greater. When fear tells you this is the end, God's promise says this is just the beginning. When fear says you're not enough, God's promise says you are chosen, equipped, and empowered. When fear says you'll never recover, God's promise says, "I restore, I redeem, I make all things new." The key is which voice you allow to take root. Fear wants to take up permanent residence in your mind, but it was never meant to live there. It may knock on the door, but you don't have to invite it in. Fear is often based on projections: what might happen, what could go wrong, what if this doesn't work out. It pulls you into a future that hasn't happened and fills it with worst-case scenarios. But God's promises pull you into a different future, one filled with hope, favor, and purpose. Fear paints a picture of defeat. God paints a picture of victory. Fear says the obstacle is too big. God says the obstacle is temporary and the breakthrough is coming. Think about the times in your past when you were afraid. At the time it felt overwhelming. You couldn't sleep. You couldn't see a solution. You wondered how you would make it through, yet here you are. The very thing that once kept you up at night is now a testimony of how God brought you through. That fear didn't last. It felt powerful in moment, but it faded. The problem changed. The situation shifted. You grew stronger. What was once a giant became a stepping stone. God's promises don't expire. They don't have a time limit. They don't depend on your perfection. Even when you stumble, even when you doubt, even when you feel weak, His promises remain intact. Fear may try to convince you that you've missed your chance, that it's too late, that you've gone too far. But God's promise says that His mercy is new every morning, that He can restore lost years, that He can open doors no one can shut. There is a difference between what is loud and what is lasting. Fear is loud. It demands your attention. It tries to rush you into panic, into decisions driven by anxiety. God's promises are steady. They may not shout, but they endure. They don't fluctuate with every headline or every mood. They are rooted in something eternal. When you choose to stand on His promises, you are standing on something that cannot be shaken. Fear focuses on the size of the problem. God's promise focuses on the size of your destiny. Fear narrows your vision to what's in front of you right now. God's promise expands your vision. What can be? Fear says, this discomfort will last forever. God's promise says, this light and momentary trouble is producing something greater than you can imagine. What you're facing today, not the full story, it's a moment in time, not the final outcome. You don't have to pretend fear isn't there. You don't have to deny the challenge, but you can recognize that fear is temporary and refuse to treat it like it's permanent. You can acknowledge the feeling without surrendering to it. You can say, this may be how I feel right now, but this is not how it will always be. Feeling change. God's word does not. Emotions rise and fall. His truth stands firm. Every time you choose to believe a promise over a fear, you are strengthening your faith. You are building resilience. You are reminding yourself that what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen is eternal. The situation may look intimidating, but it is subject to change. The diagnosis is not the final authority. Rejection is not the final chapter. The delay is not the denial. Fear will eventually fade, but what God has declared over your life will stand long after the storm passes. Worry has a subtle way of draining your strength. It doesn't usually announce itself loudly like fear does. It creeps in quietly, thought by thought, question by question. It starts with something small, an unanswered email, a delay, a comment someone made, and before long, your mind is racing through scenarios that haven't even happened. Worry consumes emotional energy. It keeps you up at night replaying conversations, predicting outcomes, trying to control what is outside your control. The more you entertain it, the heavier you feel. It's like carrying a weight you were never designed to bear. When you worry, your focus shifts from possibility to limitation. Instead of seeing what could go right, you start imagining everything that could go wrong. You begin to expect disappointment. You prepare for failure. You brace for impact. Worry trains your mind to look for problems instead of promises. It narrows your perspective and magnifies obstacles. What might have been a simple challenge becomes an overwhelming mountain because worry has exaggerated its size. Worry weakens your faith because faith and worry cannot thrive in the same space. Faith says God is in control. Worry says it's all up to you. Faith rests in the assurance that even if you don't understand the path, there is a purpose unfolding. Worry insists that if you don't figure everything out right now, everything will fall apart. Faith brings peace. Worry brings pressure. The more you allow worry to dominate your thinking, the more it chips away at your confidence in what God can do. Worry often disguises itself as responsibility. You may tell yourself that you're just being cautious, just thinking ahead, just preparing. But there is a difference between planning wisely and obsessing endlessly. Planning empowers you to take action. Worry paralyzes you with doubt. Planning considers solutions. Worry circles the problem over and over again without resolution. It's like running on a treadmill. You're expending energy, but you're not moving forward. Trust, on the other hand, strengthens your future. Trust is not passive. It's not ignoring reality or pretending everything is perfect. Trust is an active decision to place your confidence in God's ability rather than your own limitations. When you trust, you release the need to control every outcome. You acknowledge that you have a part to play, but you are not the ultimate source of the results. That shift changes everything. Instead of being driven by anxiety, you are guided by peace. When you choose trust over worry, you create space for clarity. Your mind becomes calmer. You're able to hear wisdom more clearly. You make better decisions because they are not fueled by panic. Trust steadies you. It gives you the courage to move forward even when you don't have all the answers. It allows you to take steps of faith without needing to see the entire staircase. That kind of confidence shapes your future in powerful ways. Worry tells you that your future is fragile, that one mistake could ruin everything, that one setback means it's over. Trust reminds you that your future is secure in God's hands. It reassures you that setbacks can become setups, that detours can lead to better destinations, that delays can prepare you for something greater. When you trust, you stop interpreting every challenge as a threat. You begin to see challenges as opportunities to grow stronger. Your thoughts influence your direction. If your mind is filled with worry, you will approach life cautiously, hesitantly, always expecting something to go wrong. You may hold back from opportunities because you're afraid of what might happen. You may shrink your dreams to match your fears, but when your mind is anchored in trust, you approach life with confidence. You're willing to step out. You're willing to try again. You're willing to believe that good things are ahead. That mindset opens doors. Worry drains today's joy without adding anything to tomorrow's security. It steals the present moment. Even when nothing is wrong, worry can convince you that something soon will be. It keeps you from fully enjoying your blessings because you're already anxious about losing them. Trust allows you to be present. It frees you to appreciate what you have right now without constantly fearing what could change. Trust also strengthens your resilience. When you've made the decision to rely on God, you're not easily shaken by unexpected news. You may feel the impact, but you're not destroyed by it. There's a foundation underneath you. You know that even if this didn't go as planned, God can still work it for your good. That confidence keeps you steady in storms. It keeps you from overreacting. It keeps you from making impulsive choices out of fear. Worry focuses on your weakness. Trust focuses on God's strength. Worry reminds you of what you lack. Trust reminds you of who you have on your side. When you dwell on worry, you magnify your limitations. When you dwell on trust, you magnify His power. The same situation can look completely different depending on which lens you choose. Through the lens of worry, it looks impossible. Through the lens of trust, it looks manageable because you're not facing it alone. Choosing trust doesn't mean you'll never feel tempted to worry. The thoughts may still come, the what-ifs may still try to surface, but you have the power to redirect your focus. You can replace a worried thought with a promise. You can counter anxiety with gratitude. You can remind yourself of past victories. Every time you choose trust, you're strengthening that muscle. You're training your mind to default to faith instead of fear. Over time, that choice shapes your future. A life dominated by worry feels small and restricted. A life anchored in trust feels expansive and hopeful. Trust gives you the boldness to dream again, to believe again, to step forward again. It fuels perseverance. It keeps you moving when circumstances try to push you back. Where worry weakens and exhausts, trust energizes and empowers. The future belongs to those who choose to believe that God is greater than what they're facing and who refuse to let anxious thoughts dictate the direction of their lives. What you focus on grows. That principle is at work in your life, whether you realize it or not. Your mind is like soil. Whatever you consistently plant in it, fear or faith, doubt or hope, negativity or promise, will begin to take root and multiply. If you constantly rehearse what's wrong, what's missing, what could fall apart, those thoughts will expand. They will shape your mood, influence your decisions, and affect the way you see yourself and your future. But if you choose to focus on faith, on what God has promised, on what is possible, on what is still working in your favor, that focus will grow stronger and begin to change the atmosphere around you. Fear has a way of demanding your attention. It points at the problem and says, "Look at this, think about this, analyze this from every angle." The more attention you give it, the larger it appears. A small concern can become a giant obstacle simply because you've magnified it in your mind. You replay it, you talk about it, you imagine worst-case scenarios. Before long it feels overwhelming, not necessarily because the situation is enormous, but because your focus has enlarged it. Faith works the same way. When you focus on faith, you're not denying reality, you're choosing which reality has the final say. You may see the obstacle, but you also choose to see the opportunity. You may acknowledge the challenge, but you focus on the possibility of overcoming it. When you meditate on God's goodness, when you remember how He has brought you through before, when you declare His promises over your life, that faith begins to expand. It strengthens your perspective. It builds confidence within you. Your focus determines your emotional climate. If your attention is constantly fixed on bad news, setbacks and disappointments, your inner world will reflect that negativity. You'll feel tense, discouraged, guarded. But if your focus shifts toward gratitude, growth, and God's faithfulness, something changes internally. You begin to feel lighter. Hope starts to rise. Peace begins to replace pressure. The circumstances around you may not instantly change, but the way you experience them does. Fear narrows your vision. It zooms in on what could go wrong and blocks out everything that could go right. It convinces you that the problem is the whole picture, but it's not the whole picture. It's just one part of the story. When you choose faith, your vision widens. You begin to see resources you didn't notice before. You recognize strengths within yourself. You remember that delays are not denials. You realize that one closed door does not mean the end of your journey. Whatever dominates your thoughts will eventually influence your actions. If fear dominates your thinking, you may hesitate when you should step forward. You may stay silent when you should speak up. You may settle when you are meant to soar. Fear, focused thinking leads to cautious, restricted living, but faith, focused thinking leads to bold, purposeful action. When you focus on faith, you're more willing to take healthy risks. You're more open to new opportunities. You're less intimidated by temporary setbacks. Focus is a choice. You may not be able to control every thought that comes into your mind, but you can choose which ones you dwell on. Fearful thoughts may knock at your door, but you don't have to invite them in for dinner. You can redirect your attention. You can say, I see the challenge, but I'm choosing to focus on the promise. I acknowledge the uncertainty, but I'm choosing to trust. That redirection is powerful. It shifts the trajectory of your mindset. When you consistently focus on faith, you begin to expect good things. You develop a quiet confidence that even if this situation is difficult, it's temporary. You start to look for evidence of God's hand at work. You notice small victories. You celebrate progress. Those moments build momentum. They reinforce your belief that you are not alone, that you are supported, that you are guided. Faith grows stronger because you are feeding it with your attention. Fear, when fed, will try to spread into every area of your life. A concern about your job can turn into doubt about your abilities. A worry about your health can turn into anxiety about your future. It doesn't stay contained, it expands. That's why guarding your focus is so important. You don't ignore reality, but you refuse to let it consume your entire field of vision. You remind yourself that there is more to the story than what you currently see. Gratitude is one of the most powerful ways to shift your focus toward faith. When you intentionally reflect on what is going right, what you've been blessed with, what has already been restored or provided, your perspective changes. Fear loses some of its grip because you are no longer staring exclusively at what's lacking. You're acknowledging what's present, you're recognizing progress, you're appreciating growth. Your focus also influences the people around you. When you constantly talk about problems, it can create an atmosphere of heaviness. But when you speak with faith, when you emphasize hope, when you declare that better days are ahead, it uplifts not only you but those who hear you. Faith is contagious in the same way fear is. What you focus on internally will eventually be expressed externally. Choosing faith over fear doesn't mean you'll never face challenges. It means you face them with a different lens. Instead of asking, why is this happening to me? You begin to ask, what can grow in me through this? Instead of assuming defeat, you anticipate growth. Instead of shrinking back, you lean forward with expectation. The obstacle may still be there, but your focus has shifted from the size of obstacle to the greatness of your God. As you consistently choose to focus on faith, you'll notice a change in your resilience. You recover more quickly from disappointments. You don't stay stuck in negative spirals as long. You recognize fearful thoughts sooner and replace them more deliberately. That practice strengthens you. It builds a foundation that cannot easily be shaken. What you focus on grows, and when your focus is rooted in faith, courage expands, hope multiplies, and confidence rises within you, even in the face of uncertainty. It's easy to feel overwhelmed when you're staring at a problem that seems bigger than you. The bills are higher than expected. The diagnosis wasn't what you hoped for. The opportunity you counted on didn't come through. In moments like that, your mind naturally tries to figure everything out. You start calculating, analyzing, wondering how you're going to fix it. But one of the most powerful truths you can hold onto is this: God is already ahead of the problem you're facing. Before it ever showed up in your life, He saw it. Before you felt the pressure, He had already prepared provision. Nothing catches God off guard. The obstacle that surprised you did not surprise Him. The delay that frustrated you did not confuse Him. He is not reacting to your situation. He is sovereign over it. While you're trying to understand how it happened, He is already working on how it will turn around. That changes the way you approach difficulty. Instead of panicking, you can pause. Instead of assuming the worst, you can trust that there is a plan unfolding beyond what you can see. When you believe that God is ahead of your problem, you stop feeling like you're behind. Sometimes challenges make you feel late, stuck, or at a disadvantage. You may think others are moving forward while you're dealing with setbacks, but God's timing is not limited by human schedules. He knows how to align opportunities at the right moment. He knows how to position people, resources, and solutions in ways you could never orchestrate on your own. What feels delayed to you may simply be divine preparation. There are times when you can't see any sign of progress. You pray, but the situation doesn't immediately change. You wait, but the answer doesn't instantly appear. In those moments, it's tempting to assume that nothing is happening, but just because you don't see movement doesn't mean God isn't moving. He often works behind the scenes, arranging details you're unaware of. He can be softening hearts, shifting circumstances, opening doors in places you haven't even looked yet. Think about how many times in your life something worked out in a way you could never have predicted. A closed door led to a better opportunity. A disappointment redirected you towards something greater. At the time, it felt confusing or even painful, but looking back, you can see that God was already ahead of the problem. What looked like a setback was actually protection. What seemed like rejection was redirection. He was guiding you even when you couldn't trace His hand. When you internalize this truth, it brings peace to your present moment. You don't have to have all the answers today. You don't have to solve everything at once. You can take the next step with confidence, knowing that God has already gone before you. He sees the entire path while you see only a portion. He understands how today's challenge connects to tomorrow's breakthrough. That awareness steadies your heart. Fear often tells you that you're alone in the struggle, that you're facing something unprecedented, that there's no clear way out. But God being ahead of the problem means there is already a way, even if it's not visible yet. There is provision prepared, there is strength available, there is wisdom accessible. You may not know how it will unfold, but you can trust that it will unfold in alignment with His purpose for your life. This perspective also shifts how you interpret obstacles. Instead of seeing them as proof that you're off track, you can see them as part of the journey. If God is ahead of you, then nothing you encounter is random. It may be challenging, but it is not meaningless. There is growth happening within you. There is character being developed. There is resilience being built. God can use the very thing that tried to discourage you as a tool to strengthen you. When you're tempted to worry about tomorrow, remember that God is already there. He's not confined to your present moment. He's not limited by time the way you are. The future that feels uncertain to you is fully known to Him. He knows the conversations you'll have, the opportunities you'll encounter, the solutions that will appear. That knowledge allows you to release the pressure of trying to control everything. Trust grows when you remind yourself that you're not navigating life alone. You are guided. You are supported. You are seen. Even in seasons where you feel overlooked or forgotten, God is attentive to every detail. He understands your needs before you articulate them. He anticipates challenges before they arise. He equips you with what you need before you realize you need it. There may be moments when the problem seems to intensify before it improves. It may feel like things are getting harder rather than easier, but that does not mean God has stepped back. Sometimes breakthroughs are preceded by pressure. Sometimes clarity comes after confusion. The key is holding on to assurance that God's presence goes before you. He is not walking behind you trying to catch up. He is leading the way. As you move forward, you can replace panic with perspective. Instead of saying, "How will I ever get through this?" you can say, "God is already making a way." Instead of assuming you're stuck, you can believe that progress is happening even if it's not visible yet. That mindset changes your posture. You walk differently. You speak differently. You carry yourself with quiet confidence because you trust that the one who knows the end from the beginning is actively involved in your journey. One of the greatest sources of stress in life is the desire to control everything. We want to control outcomes, timelines, people's opinions, and the way situations unfold. We want guarantees that nothing will go wrong. We want assurance that every step we take will lead exactly where we planned. But the truth is, the more tightly we try to control everything, the more anxious we become. Control can feel like security, but often it is the very thing that steals our peace. Peace does not come from having all the answers. It comes from surrendering to the one who does. Surrender is not weakness. It is not giving up on your dreams or refusing to take responsibility. It is recognizing that you were never meant to carry the full weight of your life on your own shoulders. When you try to manage every detail, you place yourself in a position that only God was designed to occupy. You begin to believe that if you don't make it happen, it won't happen. That kind of pressure creates constant tension in your mind and body. You're always bracing, always calculating, always preparing for something to go wrong. When you surrender control, you release that pressure. You acknowledge that you have a role to play, but you are not the ultimate authority over every outcome. You do your best, you act with wisdom, you take steps of faith, and then you trust God with the results. That shift changes your internal atmosphere. Instead of being driven by fear of what might happen, you are grounded in confidence that whatever happens, God can handle it. Often, the need for control is rooted in fear. We think that if we can predict everything, we can prevent pain. If we can plan every detail, we can avoid disappointment. But life does not work that way. No amount of overthinking can guarantee a smooth path. No amount of worry can secure tomorrow. Trying to control the uncontrollable only exhausts you. Surrendering control, on the other hand, allows you to rest in the present moment. Peace comes when you accept that some things are beyond your reach. You cannot control how others respond to you. You cannot control every circumstance that arises. You cannot control the timing of every breakthrough. But you can control your response. You can choose trust over anxiety. You can choose patience over panic. You can choose to believe that delays do not mean denial. That choice opens the door to a deeper sense of calm. When you surrender control, you also open yourself to possibilities greater than your own plans. Sometimes what you're trying so hard to hold onto is smaller than what God wants to give you. Your plan may be limited by your perspective. You can only see what's directly in front of you. God sees beyond the horizon. He understands how today's decisions connect to future opportunities. When you loosen your grip, you make room for His guidance. Holding onto control often creates rigidity. You become resistant to change because it disrupts your carefully constructed expectations. But surrender cultivates flexibility. It allows you to adapt when doors close and to recognize new paths when they appear. Instead of feeling devastated by every unexpected turn, you begin to see those turns as part of a larger design. That mindset protects your peace. Surrender also quiets the constant mental noise. When you're trying to control everything, your mind rarely rests. You replay conversations, you anticipate problems, you analyze possibilities, your thoughts spin in circles. But when you place your trust in God, you give yourself permission to stop striving. You remind yourself that you are not alone in this journey. That awareness calms the storm inside you, even if the external circumstances haven't changed yet. There is strength in letting go. It takes courage to say, God, I don't understand this, but I trust you. It takes humility to admit that your knowledge is limited, but that humility creates space for divine wisdom. When you're not consumed by the need to control, you can hear guidance more clearly. You can sense direction more easily. You can move forward with assurance rather than hesitation. Peace is not the absence of challenges, it is the presence of trust. You may still face uncertainty, you may still encounter obstacles, but surrender transforms how those obstacles affect you. Instead of viewing them as threats to your stability, you begin to see them as opportunities to deepen your faith. Instead of feeling like everything depends on you, you rest in the knowledge that God is working behind the scenes. When you surrender control, you also release the burden of perfection. You no longer feel the need to get everything exactly right. You understand that mistakes can be redeemed, detours can be redirected, setbacks can be restored. That understanding frees you from constant self-criticism. It allows you to move forward without the fear of ruining everything with one wrong step. Each day presents new opportunities to practice surrender. In small frustrations and major decisions alike, you can choose to let go of the illusion of control. You can take a deep breath and remind yourself that God is guiding your steps. You can trust that even when things don't unfold the way you expected, they are not out of His hands. As you consistently choose surrender over striving, anxiety loses its grip, and a steady, unshakable peace begins to guard your heart and